Well, a very, very warm welcome to you guys. Hi, it's Cassim, and welcome to another episode of the Man to Man podcast show. Want to firstly start off as usual by saying thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to me and some of the things that I'm going to share with you. We're going through a bit of a really weird time at the moment with the coronavirus. We're going through a really weird time at the moment with the whole pandemic and kids, and Halloween's probably going to be cancelled, and then Christmas is probably going to be cancelled, and we might potentially go into a second lockdown. Some parts of the UK are going through a lockdown. So there is a lot of things that are happening around the world. And I think there is a lot of uncertainty. We live in a world which is very, very, very uncertain. So honestly, I know that sometimes listening to me might be the only kind of solace that you may have in your life, and is some kind of direction. So hopefully something that I share with you today can be useful. Hopefully something that I share with you today can point you in the right direction, or maybe trigger something in you about a way to think, or a way to live, so that you can become your highest, fullest expression of who you're capable of becoming. So honestly, thank you very much for listening to me. So I want to talk to you about a number of things today. Again, I don't know whether I'm going to have enough time to talk about all of them, but just to give you a bit of a preview, as you've already seen from what I've entitled today, one of the things that I particularly want to talk to you men about, if you're a guy who's watching this and we're just talking man to man and we're just talking, male to male, is I want to talk to you really about this whole concept of working really hard and how simply working hard is not enough. And then I also would like to talk to you about the fact that if you have been given an unlimited amount of money, what problem in the world would you solve? The other thing that I wanted to speak to you about is I wanted to speak to you about being positive, and really looking at people's stories and what people have to offer. So let's firstly begin off with me talking a little bit about this concept of working hard is not enough. So I was admiring a guy who I work with. His name is Mohammed, and I was working with him in Tesco's, and I saw him and I was watching him. One of the things that I've decided to do not recently decided to do, but about 6 years ago I decided to do, is that I decided to start observing life. And the reason why I started observing life is that many of you will know my story. That day that I had a bailiff come to my door, and I was in debt, and I saw my mum crying, I came to the realization that clearly some of the things that I knew were not correct. See, I always thought I had figured everything out. I always thought that I had all the answers to everything. I thought I knew the path that I was on, and that I was definitive, and I was absolutely sure that what I was doing was the right thing. And that day that I had a bailiff come to my mum's house, tell my mum that I'm in debt due to having loads of paid, I think it was something like 11 payday loans. I had parking fine tickets that I'd not paid, which had gone to bailiffs and all kinds of things. I was in my overdraft. I was living paycheck to paycheck. When that day happened, I was like, Cash, you can't surely say that you know everything. You can't surely say that your path is working because, buddy, a bailiff's just come to your mum's door. So clearly something that you know to be the truth is not the truth. Something that you believe is right clearly cannot be right. I mean, Cash, you say that you're a good guy. All right, well, let's look at your life. You've, number one, been lying to your parents. Number two, you've got yourself in debt and haven't been man enough to ask for help. So, do you see what I mean? I mean, Cash, let's look at your results and let's look at what you've been saying. One of the things that is a major factor in my life at the moment is the word integrity. The word integrity has been at the center of my life for the last kind of 40 years or more. For the last 4 years. Primarily because the word integrity means to be whole. It means to be one. Essentially, it means that your words, so what you say, what you talk about, what you complain about, matches your actions. So, for example, for me, if I believe that people should be good, my actions have to back it up. And so I've really tried over the last kind of 4 years or so to really match what I say with what I do so that I can be somebody of integrity. And when I was speaking to my colleague and my friend the other day, one of the things that I was talking to Mohammed about is that I was so impressed by his work ethic. Primarily because, and let me just step back a little bit, by the way, before I continue with the story. On this line, one of the major things that happened 6 years ago that became a reality for me was that I realized that the entire world didn't revolve around me. And I know that for some of you who are listening to me, this may be a bit like, come on, Cass, that's really obvious. Duh, what, are you some kind of idiot? But honestly, I genuinely didn't realize that there are other people who have problems, that there are other people who are suffering, that there are other people who need help, that there are other people who have the same problems as myself, that there are other people who've solved the problems that I'm complaining about. I came to this profound realization where I was like, oh my God, literally the world does not revolve around me. That if I'm not rich, in all honesty, nobody really gives a shit, right? I couldn't believe it when I started, like, reading stories of people who, for example, had lots of money, lost all their money, and then all the people who they thought that were their friends disappeared. And I was like, well, how can you have so many friends around you, and then now that you've lost your money, your friends have disappeared? And what I found was that that person was so preoccupied with the ego, with trying to impress people, with trying to get people's affirmation, that that individual never realized that they're not the center of the universe. That other people have their own agendas and other people have their own paths that they're trying to follow, their own dreams. Other people have their own intentions for being in your life. And when you understand that people, even though people are with you, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're for you. All of a sudden you start realizing that really not everything that you do is really at the center of your life. So anyway, going back to the story. So I was talking to Mohammed and I was saying to Mohammed, you know, I'm really impressed with your work ethic. I'm really impressed because you've clearly worked way harder than everybody else here does. And Mohammed stopped me and Mohammed said, you know, Cass, I appreciate you saying that, but I don't work hard, I work smart. And I said, well, to be honest with you, you are actually correct, and that's what I meant to say. But a lot of people don't really understand when I say that what I mean. And I was saying to him, you know, Mohammed, I grew up in a country where. So before I said that to him, before I said what I'm going to say in a moment, I was saying to Mohammed that, Mohammed, you know, you are very lucky because you've managed to learn this lesson of working hard versus working smart. And I said to him that a lot of people don't really get this lesson for a long time in their life. And I was explaining to him that, you know, Mohammed, I grew up in Africa. And one of the things that I noticed when I was in Africa, because I started observing people and I started observing life from a very early age, is that people in Africa work really hard. There is nobody who can dispute that people in Africa work hard. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people in Africa, like any country around the world, who don't work very hard. But when you compare the amount of hours and the labor and the amount of labor intensive work that is put into trying to survive in Africa, I think most of us would agree that somebody in Africa works way harder than somebody in the Western world, or even somebody in India or somebody in Nepal. And I was saying to him that in Africa, I thought people worked really hard, but I got really confused when I came to England, because I found that in England, people didn't work as hard as people used to in Africa, and yet they had more money, and yet they were more successful, right? And I was saying to him, you're very lucky that you learned this lesson very early on. And Muhammad said something to me, which is what essentially I'm trying to get to, giving you this really long story. So Muhammad said to me that, Cassim, he said, yeah, man, some lessons, no matter how intelligent you are, and some principles, no matter how knowledgeable you are or how experienced you are, you simply are not going to get unless you have mentoring, unless you have somebody around you who gives you the advice. And I guess it is that I really wanted to illustrate and talk to you as man to man. Because it's all very nice you working hard, it's all very nice you putting in effort, but the reality of life is you can never know everything. And what I have found, and I come from, and I talk from a place of experience here, is that the error that I made in my life very early on, is that I used to use my own experience to validate what decisions I was making. I simply used my own experience. I said, the best teacher is my own experience. I had to refine that statement because that's not true, right? If I relied on touching the fire to determine whether it's a good choice or not, that would be a foolish and unwise decision to make. What would be a wise decision to make is to take the advice of all the people around me who have tried to touch the fire before and have got burnt, and think and really sit with that. Does that ring a bell to me? What are these people's intentions? Why are they telling me this? And then come from that space. Not just take obviously what they say to me as fact, but to really listen to what they're saying to me. Does it seem like the truth? What is their intention? Are they wanting something from me, or are they sharing this with me so that I can live a better life? And what I would share with you is that as a guy, you have to get to the point where you start seeking out people who are wiser than you. And that may mean that you are going to be having to be seen starting small. That means that you're going to be in rooms with people who are far superior in their level of thinking, in their level of wisdom, in their level of success than you. One of the greatest benefits that ever happened to me in my life, particularly as I was coming through, I guess, from about age 17 to about age 23, is that I worked in restaurants. And one of the great benefits about working in restaurants is that I always worked with people who were considerably older than me. And when you work with people who are considerably older than you, and you have the kind of mindset that I have, which is to observe, you begin to notice there is a lot. I mean, I worked, I think, in like 7 different restaurants. I worked in Strada, 0 Degrees, Cafe Rouge, Bella Italia, and all these different places. And when you work in all these different places and you observe people, you begin to realize everybody is complaining about the same shit. Everybody in this work is unhappy with their lives. Everybody doesn't like these hours. Everybody has given up hope. And I remember thinking to myself as I was growing up, why does everybody hate this job? Because I've come from Africa where we didn't have very much. People have this opportunity to be a waiter or be a manager, and yet they hate these jobs. And this is a kind of observation that I'm asking you to really think about and to begin to speak to wise people about. Start asking yourself questions like, why do most people hate their jobs? And if so many people hate their jobs, why don't they just do something different? And when it goes even deeper, bring it back on yourself and say, do I hate my job? And even further than that is, am I doing anything about it? And if I'm not doing anything about it, why am I not doing anything about it? And as I say this stuff to you, really, as I say, at the center of this lesson and this message that I want to share with you is, you really need to start getting around people who are wiser than you. Because if you don't get around people who are wiser than you, there are some lessons you just simply are not going to learn. You just aren't going to learn them because your level of wisdom isn't there. You don't have time to learn all that stuff. For example, a lot of people come to me and they say, Cassim, you know about success, you know about happiness and that kind of stuff, why do people come to you? And I say to people, because for the last 6.5 years, I've been reading 3 books a week on this topic of how do you start with nothing and end up becoming successful. How many people do you know in their own lives, with children, with a mortgage, with friends, can read that many books and dedicate their lives to studying that kind of a question? Most people can't do that, right? A lot of us, we dedicate ourselves in one area, typically speaking. And so really, I would ask you to ask yourself, how many wise people have you got around you? How many seminars have you attended of people who are way superior in their knowledge, in their skill set? Because the tendency for human beings that I have found, particularly for men, is that we want to be the shark in the pond. We want to be around people where we are the top dog so that we can feed our ego. In the pursuit of trying to answer the second question, which fascinates me, which is how do you become successful without ending up divorced, without ending up killing yourself, without ending up stepping on other people to get there. One of the things that I learned about was this ego. Everybody has an ego. And in that pursuit of power, of control, of wealth, we activate the ego to its max. It's all about me. What can I get? How much more can I get? How much further can I go? And in humbling ourselves and in becoming a person who is a wiser person, who becomes a kind of individual who is better at making choices, we must silence and begin that journey of silencing our ego so that our choices and our intentions come from a pure place. They come from a good space, right? I was speaking to a guy today and he said to me, I've seen some of your videos online and I was just wondering, do you make any money from them? And I said, no, I don't make any money. So he said, why do you do the videos? And I said, I do the videos because I really want to help other people. I don't do videos and I don't write books and that kind of stuff to make money. If I really wanted to make money, everybody who knows me knows I could easily go and make money. I could easily get up in management in a job. It's easy for me. I could do that. I've done it before, right? I could easily go and do sales and earn 100k a year if the absolute thing. I'm one of those people where if I say something is going to be done, it's done. If I say I'm going to earn 100k a year, I will earn 100k a year at any cost. So the problem for me isn't about money. I do the videos because I want to help people. I've had to silence my ego so much that everything that I do really comes from a place of in what way can what I do help improve other people's lives. And I think part of looking at getting around people who are wiser than you is about living in a space where you start asking yourself, how can I be of service? Understanding that your life can be used as a vehicle to improve other people's lives. What is it that Martin Luther King Jr. once said, that not everybody can be famous, but everybody can achieve greatness. And the reason why everybody can achieve greatness and not fame is because greatness is determined by service. And everybody can use their life, use their knowledge, use their skill set in order to be of service. Many of us guys who are listening to this, we want to be serviced and do not seek to service other people. We don't want to use our life, our job, our platform as a vehicle to improve lives. And I have found that all the abundance, all the fruit, all of the glory, all of the winnings of life come when somebody starts from the intention of, how can I serve you? When your family is fruitful and your family is happy, it is because you're asking, what do the kids need? What does my wife need? But beyond that, I'm actually asking you as a man to think much bigger and much further than just your family. Because if you want to have abundance beyond your wildest dreams, you've got to start going beyond your own family. You've got to start asking, what can I do for other people? What can I use? What can I use the life that I've been given? Who else can I use to impact the life that I've been given? What else more can I do with this life, these gifts, this skill set? What more can I learn? And I think that when you start thinking in terms of being of service to the world, of your community, of your neighbors, this is when all of a sudden wisdom can be activated, because you will discover that you don't have a lot of the things that you need. You will discover that actually you lack in some areas of your life. And that is when you will all of a sudden be on this pursuit to better yourself. Jim Rohn called it personal development. This pursuit to improve your character, to improve your thinking, to improve the way in which you make choices. When you get to the point where you realize that you can be wrong, that what you believe to be the truth isn't the truth, but it is a version of the truth. When you understand that, when you get that your way or your perspective or your way of seeing the world or your perceptions or your attitude are only one of a multiverse of different opinions and different attitudes, your world changes. You become humbler. You become the kind of person who is curious, because now you start having what I believe everybody should have, particularly men, is a mind that is open to everything and is attached to nothing. So instead of you seeking to be correct, you seek to be effective. You seek the truth, right? And that's what I would share with you. But ultimately, as I've said to you guys, this is your life. You've got to do whatever you believe to be the truth for you. But to sum up that lesson, I would encourage you to seek wisdom from people who have wisdom. Seek insight from people who've already had insight. Start getting around people who know considerably more than you. Get around people who are much, much, much older than you. You would be shocked at the amount of wisdom you will get from your parents if only you'd ask them, Mum and Dad, can I interview you for an hour about life? Can I ask you what you've learned in your life that you can share with me? People say to me, Cassim, why did you start the journal entries? I started the journal entries for this exact reason. Many people do not realize that people who are successful don't actually know how they were successful. They've never quantified it. They've never sat down and actually analyzed it and reflected on it and said, oh, actually, the reason why my relationship is amazing is because actually every Friday me and my wife, we have this tradition that we do this. Me and my wife, we communicate and talk about literally everything, to the point where I say, babes, I'm going to the shop, right? But I've never gone to the shop and not told my wife or sent her a text or something like that. Most successful people have never deconstructed their success. That's usually why you need somebody like me. You would be shocked at the amount of people who I ask, how have you got a really great marriage? And they have no idea. They don't know. They've never really thought about it. They've just kind of figured it out, and they've tried errors and they've trial and errors and done this and done that. And somehow they've magically come up with this amazing relationship, which everybody just thinks they're lucky, right? Of course it isn't. They've worked really hard to get it like that. But as I say, I would really encourage you to really look at getting around people who are successful and asking them how they did it. Getting around, observing people who are failures. Why is it that this person is unhappy? What is leading their life to be unhappy? You know, start observing life and asking, why is it that some people are rich and some are poor? Why is it that it seems to me that there are some people who have kids and think that having children is really important, but some people don't? Why do some people so strongly live their life by religion? It's these kinds of questions that all of a sudden alter not only your perception, but they alter the basis in which you make decisions. So that's the first thing that I wanted to share with you. The second thing that I wanted to talk about, man to man, that I wanted to discuss with you is I wanted to talk about this concept of what would you do if you had an unlimited amount of money. So recently, and I think it's been about a month, everyone that I know, or everyone who I come in contact with, I've been asking them a question. It's a very simple question. And the question has been, I've been asking people, if the government came to you and the government said to you, look, let's just say your name is Cassim. Look, Cassim, we are going to give you an unlimited amount of money. For the rest of your life, we're going to give you any amount that is required. We're going to give you any resource at our disposal. And your job, before you die, is to solve one problem. That's it. And as I've been asking people this, people have said to me, well, Cassim, can I split it between two? No, you can't. This is one problem. You have one problem. You can expand a problem, you can solve a problem, you can build something, whatever it is. The government will give you the money to fund and the resources that are available currently to solve whatever problem that you have. And to this day, not a single person has been able to give me an answer to this question. I've usually had to keep digging and keep digging and keep digging and keep digging and keep digging before somebody eventually gives me an answer. And I usually by then have prompted them. I've talked about nuclear weapons, I've talked about animals, I've talked about cruelty to children, I've talked about domestic abuse. But most people have no idea what they would do if they had an unlimited amount of money to solve a problem. And so my question to you is the same question. What would you do if you were given by the government an unlimited amount of money to solve one problem? What would that problem be? Because if the answer to that question is, Kaz, I don't fucking have a clue, I don't know, then that kind of tells you something about yourself. It actually tells us two things. Number one, you are so preoccupied with either having fun, basically, you're so preoccupied with yourself and what you want to achieve that you've never even considered that there are other people in disarray, other people's lives, animals in cruelty, that we have lots of problems around the world that need solving to do with the environment, right? To do with computing, to do with equality, right? It's just never even occurred to you. The second thing that it shows us is you're not somebody who has basically decided that in your lifetime you're going to take accountability and solve something. There is a saying that says that, and it was said by the Buddha. Buddha said that every day good people have to wake up and try to empty the ocean with a spoon. So what that tells us is that you've never been the kind of person who's decided that even though your actions are insignificant, that even though there is a problem that is so big, so large, that one person like you could not possibly ever really improve, you've never really decided to still go ahead and try to improve it. That's the two things that I think it tells us. It could tell us more things and we could get into it, but immediately those two things kind of fall off the edge of my tongue. And I would ask you, does that sound like somebody like you? Because here's what I believe. I believe that as a man, one of the highest levels of maturity that you can go to is the day that you decide that you are going to use your life to solve one problem. You're going to dedicate your life to solving a problem, to putting all your efforts into an endeavor. And I wonder whether you've actually ever decided that and what that could be. Have you actually ever thought what that problem would be that you would solve? Because here's what I have found, guys. This is a really dark and hard lesson for me to really coach people, because they kind of need to go through. I have found usually people's wisdom is not at a level where they're going to get or understand when I say this message. Most people kind of need to live this message to get this. No amount of external achievement or material gains will ever fulfill you, ever. It doesn't matter how much money you earn. I'm telling you, when you earn that much money, you'll always want more. it is almost unfathomable for some people to consider that there are people who genuinely have everything and they're unhappy. They have children, they have a wife, they live in a nice neighborhood, they have a massive house, they have any car that they want. They get to basically replace their car every like 12 months. They go on 3 holidays a year. They have multiple properties, one in Italy, one in England, one in Monaco. Basically, these people are living their best life. They have everything that the average human being could possibly ever want. And yet these individuals are unhappy. And what most people don't get is, weirdly enough, I was actually explaining this to somebody today, which is in part why I'm trying to share it with you, because I think it's so important. I was explaining to my friend that when you get to the point where you have everything, a question arises which most people have never really thought of. That question is, what now? This, you see, if you've never asked yourself that question, what now, it's because you've never achieved. You've never got to the point where you've had everything. But when you get to the point where you have achieved everything, which very few people ever get to do, which is why this lesson is so hard to teach people, because most people never get to the point where they have everything so that they can learn this lesson. But when you get to the point where you have everything, you will be like, well, what do I do now? I've done everything that I was supposed to do. I've had the children, I've got grandchildren, I have the money, I have the house, I have this financial security, I have everything that I'm supposed to be doing. What do I do now? There are 2 ways you go. The first way that you go is basically you become like a teacher, okay? So I call it, I have 6 stages of life, and when you reach what's called mastery, that's what the stage of life I call it mastery, where you have mastered every area of your life, right? You then go 2 ways. Number 1 is what's called contribution, which is where you become like a teacher, you set up a school, you have like a foundation. You get the point of where I'm going with this. The other way that you go, which is where so many of us see people, is I call it the chasing the high note. And I learned this lesson from Michael Jackson, because what happens is when you've achieved everything and you don't decide to go back and coach and teach other people, what you do is you try to hit the high note. Many of you are familiar with Michael Jackson, and you will know that Michael Jackson's Thriller album beat every record. To this day, nobody has been able to match Michael Jackson's success of that Thriller album anywhere near. I mean, it was a phenomenon. It was unseen. It was nothing like it had ever been experienced in human history. And Michael Jackson was on this pursuit for the rest of his life after doing that album to basically have what's called a high note, to beat the success of Thriller. I mean, to the point where he had insomnia. I mean, the guy was sleeping like two hours a night, and he wasn't even sleeping then. You know, people talk about him being obsessed with waking up. He had a special doctor who would help him to stay up longer. And it was insane. And one of the things that people say killed him was this pursuit for the high note. The guy would be practicing for like 20 hours a day to try and better the Thriller album. And so I was explaining to somebody today that one of the things that happens is if you've ever been around like people who are boats, if you decide not to go back and contribute, what tends to happen, and I call it pioneering, is it begins, your ego is activated, where it's a game of who has the most, who has the biggest. So if you've ever been around people who are boats, in the marina, it is a game of who has the biggest boat. People may have a yacht which costs them £20 million, but if somebody rocks up and has a bigger yacht than them which costs £21 million, that person will discard their success because the other person has a bigger boat. It sounds ridiculous to most people because it's like it's a completely different level of success. But what I'm saying to you is this is what happens. No matter how high you reach, I'm telling you, there will always be another level. You earn £100,000, there'll be somebody who earns 250. You earn $1 million, there'll be somebody who earns 200 million. right? I call it the infinite game. The infinite game. Let me take this deeper. There are two types of games. I was actually explaining this in my book. There are two types of games. There are what are called finite games, and there are what are called infinite games. So a finite game is like a game of football. A game of football where there is an outcome, there is an end. So in football, the two sides play. Worst case scenario, it gets to penalties, but at the end of it, there's a winner and a loser. Right? That's the end of it. So that's the first game. Then there are what are called infinite games. An infinite game is like business. So, for example, if the company you work for this year makes, let's say, £100,000 profit, that will not be the end of it. Because what will happen is that they will go next year. What are they going to do? They're going to ask for 110, 120, right? The game never finishes. The game never ends. And that's the way a lot of people live their lives. They live their lives based on this game of, on this infinite game where no matter what they get into a relationship, that's never good enough. They get money, that's never good enough. It's just constant chasing, this constant pursuit where they feel as though nothing is ever enough. And what I would share with you, and again, going back to what I originally wanted to talk to you, is that you want to really start thinking about what it is that you're here to do. What is your purpose? What is it that you're going to spend your life doing? Because my point to you is this, and this is why I told you all that stuff. There is never, ever going to be enough. I'm telling you, there is never you're never going to, if your pursuit is on things outside of yourself, you're never going to get to a point where you say, I've had enough. That's it. Right? You're not, right? A lot of people think when I have a child, my life will be complete. Then they have their child, but then they pursue something else, and they're like, then I want my child to get into school. Then I want my child to get married. Then I want my child to have grandchildren. It's just constant pursuit. A lot of people think when I get married, everything will be solved. I will be fulfilled. They get married. Now they have to deal with the problems of the marriage, right? Then they have to deal with, are we going to be married for 7 years? There's always something more. So when you learn this lesson and get that there is always going to be something for you to chase, you then understand, so what is it that's going to fulfill me then? What is it that's going to allow me to basically say, get to the end of my life and say, I'm done. I could not have done any more. And this lesson is so difficult because, unfortunately, usually the only way you can teach somebody this is that they have to go down this path, or usually they have to have everything taken away from them. Because when you have everything that you value or you find meaningful taken away from you, you then get to a point where you realized, oh my God, I am going to die. That's why I talk so much about death. In fact, I spent most of my first book talking about death. Because I've realized that it's impossible for me to teach people this lesson unless they get that they're going to die. Because they're just going to continue down this path of pursue, more money, more holidays, more better clothes, better haircut, more. It's just, I'm telling you, when you have a 3-bedroom house, you won't be satisfied with 3 bedrooms. Just be like, now we've got to paint the room. Now we've got to have new floorboards. Now we've got to have a new kitchen. You will never get to a point where you're fulfilled. So I would encourage you to really start asking, what are you here to do? What is your purpose? What problem is it that you're going to dedicate yourself to solving? So that when you get to the end of your life, you say, Cassim, look, I made a dent in the universe. It was nothing, but I did. Cass, I could not have done any more. That's what I would personally encourage you to do. Ultimately, as I've said to you guys on many occasions, it's your life. You've got to live it however you wish. You've got to do whatever makes you happy. But if you want to yield my words on the research that I have done on people who've achieved success without ending up divorced, without ending up killing themselves, I can tell you right now that every single one of those individuals operates from a space of purpose, from a place of mission, from a place of service, from a place of how can I use my life to improve the lives of other people? How can I use my life to, in some way, help other people suffer less, to liberate people, to inspire people, to educate people? Those people, coincidentally, are always the people, weirdly enough, who are the most successful as well. So that's the second lesson. The third thing that I wanted to talk to you about is I wanted to talk to you about this idea of the fact that you want to try and ask about people's stories. So I work with another woman. Her name is Gail. Gail's a fascinating woman. Gail is really, 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 really positive. Gail is a really, really Gail takes things really personally. She's an all or nothing kind of person, right? And I've been observing Gail. As I said to you at the beginning of this episode, I was explaining that I have got to the point where I've realized my life is bigger than myself, and I observe people. I observe, what do people say? What do people do? Where are people going? What are people complaining about? How are people successful? How are people failures? What is success? What is failure? So I observe all this all the time. And I've been observing Gail, and I said to her the other day, I said, Gail, let me ask you this question, because, look, I don't get it. I don't understand. Why are you so positive? Why are you always on? Why are you always the kind of person who's driven? You come to this job, and the reason why I asked her this question was because at the moment, a lot of people who do the same job that me and Gail do complain about the job. They don't like it. They think that the job is beneath them. And Gail gives it 100%, and she's always on. And I was like, Gail, I don't understand. Why are you like this? Why are you so driven? Why are you so passionate about this? What do you know that I don't know? And Gail was, of course, laughing, as everybody always does, because she was like, I don't know, Kaz. That's just how I am. You know, as I said to you earlier on, a lot of people who are successful, or a lot of people who are positive, they don't realize how they did it. They just figured out a way, or they had no choice but to do it. And so eventually, later on, I was minding my own business, and I remember I was picking up broccoli at the time. And Gail comes up to me and says, do you know what, Cass? I think I can tell you why. She said, when I was 21 years of age, my brother was in a car crash. And he died in the car crash. And she said, for about 3 years, I didn't exist in this form. Were the words that she used. She said, for about 3 years, I didn't exist in this form. Right? Quite powerful statement for somebody to say. And she said, after that, I got to the point where I said, I am going to live life fully. I'm going to live my life like all or nothing, with that kind of all or nothing attitude. And what I was thinking about, and as I was speaking to her, and she was telling me her story, one of the things that I found really interesting, and I guess is something that I would encourage you to do, just talking to man, is to really begin to pay attention to people who have been through a lot. If you observe that somebody's really positive, and I'm going to give you a secret here because, you know, this is something that a lot of people don't know. If you really want to figure out who are the most loving, who are the kindest people, who are the people who are going to be the most successful, find people who've been through a lot of shit. Find people who are really positive. Find people who are really energetic and figure out why it is. And if you can... Now, I'm naturally gifted at this because a lot of people, as I found out, are willing to tell me their stories. But if you come with an open heart, and you have come with a curiosity, and you come with a heart of sharing, those people will tell you their story. If those people tell you their story, you will get more from their story than you will probably learn from anything else. And I've come to realize a lot of people don't have this benefit. A lot of people don't recognize the people who have wisdom, the people who are loving, the people who are knowledgeable. Because one of the things that you begin to realize, and this is what I've now got to realize, is usually people were not this way before. People who are good, people who are kind, people who are passionate, people who are driven, people who are relentless, usually were not born like this. Something triggered them. Something usually happened in their life to make them become like this. And that's what I would encourage you to really think about. Find people who seem out of, I would say, you would call them mavericks, or you would call them extraordinary. These individuals, whenever you see somebody who's off the path slightly, who doesn't operate in the same way, who doesn't speak in the same way, who doesn't use language like everybody else, who's a bit more positive, whenever you find them, figure out their story. Get them to tell you what happened. Because most people, I've come to realize, do not understand and get that people are not usually born like this. There are some people, of course, as we all know, there's always an exception to every rule. There's some people who are naturally born and they have a certain leaning towards being positive. They have a certain leaning towards being driven, But I can tell you that a lot of people weren't born like that, and that they developed it. And this is where, when you begin to align yourself with them, because a lot of people say, Cass, I don't know who good people. I don't know anyone positive. I don't have any good role models in my life. Because usually they're not attuned to what is going on around them. It is for that reason why I told you the first lesson is to pay attention to what is happening around you. Pay attention to what everybody's doing around you. What's everybody saying? How is everybody operating? What is people's philosophy? Look at, what the path that these people are on, where is it leading them to? The path that I'm on, where is it leading me to? How do I speak? How do I respond to people? Right? How do other people respond when people speak to them? Just begin to really become really attuned to your life. Pay attention to what the hell is going on, right? Because the thing that and I find really fascinating about this is that all of the amazing things really come from the space where you start paying attention. And I've got to tell you that you would be shocked at the amount of people who do not pay attention to their life. One of the things that I always find really interesting is I ask a lot of people who've broken up with people, I always say to them, why did you break up? And many times when I first ask them that question, they will say to me, well, this person cheated. But then, after they've told me this, I will then go deeper and I will start asking them, so how was your relationship, 6 months prior to? Because what most people don't realize is that their relationship breaking up is a result. It is that them breaking up, the person cheating, somebody having an argument, that was the result. That was like the thing that tipped it over the edge, right? Usually there were cracks in the wall, there were cracks in the glass long before what ended up being the breakup. And part of the reason why people call the reason for the breakup, they call it the cheating or whatever it may be, is because they never paid attention to all the small signs. They never listened to themselves. They never followed their gut instinct. And I guess that's what I'd really ask you to consider, and I'd ask you to really think about. Are you paying attention to your life? Are you speaking to people and asking them what their story is? Do you realize that other people live differently to you? I was watching this program on TV because one of the things that I have to do, many of you will know I'm training to be a counselor. And one of the things that I have to do is people ask me really interesting questions. Questions like, what do I think about the death penalty? Does God exist? This kind of stuff. So I've had to really think about these questions. Like, do I believe God exists? What do I believe about humanism, spirituality? Do I believe that there's a hell? Because if somebody asks me, I've kind of got to be able to give them an answer or point them in the right direction. And one of the things that I was looking at the other day is I was looking at, does hell exist? And I was listening to this debate, and I was watching these two people, well, this woman essentially share her views. And as she was sharing her views, there was a man who was getting infuriated with her. This man eventually managed to be able to share his views. And when he shared his views, it wasn't about opening a dialogue and opening about a space where a conversation could be had. It was about berating the other person. Not having patience for the other person to understand that perhaps that person is ignorant, perhaps that person isn't aligned and attuned to understand that the way in which you say things can be hurtful for other people. But on the other way, I was looking at this and thinking this woman clearly doesn't understand that perhaps some of the things that she's doing and being misinterpreted, or they're being misconstrued by people, or they can be considered as triggering. But either way, both of them, I found, were not really paying attention to what was happening around them, the environment in which they were in, being respectful, understanding that people can have opposing views and actually still be friends and actually still get on. If you look at many of the problems that we're having today, particularly around racism, around this whole females matter, Me Too movement, all of it comes from a space where a lot of people feel that they don't have room to be able to share their view. And if they share their view, they're going to be attacked. They're going to be hated. They're not going to get an opportunity to fully explain themselves to people who are come forward with an open heart. And so what I would share with you is start to have an open heart. Start to speak to people, because you'll begin to realize that your truth isn't the only truth. You begin to realize that people have gone through incredible things and that they can share with you some incredible levels of wisdom, some incredible tactics, some incredible philosophies that perhaps might be useful for you to adopt in your own life. And I don't know whether that's been helpful for you guys or not, or how you found it, but I was really thinking about those three things, and I just wanted to share them with you. But to finish off, what I wanted to close today with is I wanted to close with what I call the A to Z versus the art of living, because I'm sure you've probably seen with the theme of today that much of what I've talked about is really around character and who we are as people, and I've talked a lot about the science of achievement, of getting what you want. But I wanted to differentiate something to you that I think a lot of people don't understand, and it took me about 24 years to get to the point of understanding. I believe that there are two parts to life. And if you don't understand these two parts to life, what inevitably can happen is that you can end up leading a life which is empty, which is hollow. So these are the two parts that I believe. I believe that the first part of life is what I call the A to Z. The A to Z sometimes can be considered as the science of achievement. It's the ability to get what you want. Pretty much, a lot of people can kind of get this, right? Know what you want, go towards it, get people to help you, that kind of stuff. Right? A lot of people kind of get that, and a lot of people have pretty much figured out how to get pretty much whatever it is that they wanted, right? But where a lot of people lack, and a lot of people don't understand, is there's another part to life. Because what I discovered was that it is possible for you to be successful and be a dickhead. It is possible for you to be successful and cheat other people. So the second part of life is what I call the art of living. And the art of living basically says that you want to work on yourself. You want to work on your attitude, on your philosophies, on your perceptions, on your decision making, on your ability to be attuned, on your ability to be present, right? You want to work on your knowledge, on your philosophies. And a lot of people don't work on that. And this is where you get a lot of people, going back to what I started talking about earlier on, this is where you get somebody who's really successful, has everything in life, but doesn't use their life in service to other people. They have a lot of resources at their disposal, but they do nothing with it. As weird as this may sound, some people don't have the level of wisdom to understand that to whom much is given, much is also required. That there is a certain responsibility that comes from having a great multitude, that comes from having a platform. And that wisdom and that knowledge comes from being around wise people, from speaking to other people who are much further ahead than you. It comes from a space where you open your heart out to different views, to different thoughts, to different perceptions, to different philosophies. And I would share with you to ask yourself whether you've perhaps mastered the A to Z, but you've never mastered the art of living. That perhaps you, maybe like a lot of people in Africa, you've actually mastered. A lot of people in third world countries are pretty happy people. They've mastered the art of living. But where they haven't mastered is the A to Z. And I believe that much of life is about having a balance between both of these, right? The Buddhists talk about the inter-er, right? They talk about the fact that you cannot have the good without the bad. You cannot have the yin without the yang. You cannot have the light without the darkness. You cannot have good without evil. The world operates on this kind of equilibrium where everything must have an opposite. And perhaps you haven't realized that in your life there's got to be a balance. There's got to be an element of getting what you want, but also there's got to be an element of giving away, of sharing. Right? Isn't that what we're given two hands for? One hand to feed ourselves and the other hand to share with somebody else. And a lot of us guys don't share with other people. We don't share. We have a lot of money. Some of us earn £1,500 every single month, but we've never given a penny to charity. Every now and then we may leave 50 quid, 50p or a pound in a charity box because it's change. But we don't do it with the intention. And what I'm saying to you is, open your heart out, start living intentionally, start becoming attuned to your life, and I believe remarkable things will begin to happen in your life. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. I don't know whether, as I say, if it's been helpful or not, but I hope it has. You know what to do, guys. If you found the show useful today, the podcast, jump on our YouTube channel, Cassim, like it, subscribe, so you can keep supporting us and join the community. But that kind of ends where we are. So thank you so much. Continue seeking to be your highest, fullest expression of yourself, and we shall see you in the next episode. Bye for now.